in your environment are going to be manifested in this dimension. Because, see, 4/5 of you is not of this world. Okay, your soul body, your emotional body, your mental body, your spiritual body is not of this world. Okay, only those people who have a vibratory rate high enough going through their optic nerve can see these other bodies. Okay, so you're not, 4/5 of you are not even here. It's only this 1/5 of you that's vibrating at this rate that you see yourself on a physical level. Okay, so this brain has the capacity to tap you into all of your cells, or depending upon the part of it that you choose to activate, to determine whether you're going to be locked in into only this dimension. Okay, so it's very, very interesting, because Wayne and I were talking about this last night, is that the body has automatic programming. You know that. You don't have to think about breathing. You don't have to think about telling your heart to pump. You don't have to think about telling the circulation to move. You don't have to think about telling the muscles to fasciculate and contract, etc. Because when you think about going across the room, you're not saying, okay, muscle and leg and tendon and whatever, etc., do this, that, and the other. That's all automatic programming. And that is brainstem activity. So this is all your software that you have to deal with this dimension. Okay? And that's why when people did not pay attention to the inner weather and the outer weather, they didn't use their keys, etc., wind up being in what's known as accidents, because there's no such thing, but because they didn't decide not to use their keys and a whole bunch of other things, they put themselves in a space in time that was not of their frequency, that they got an immediate interaction with some other type energies. And too many times it causes them to have what's known as head trauma. And so, therefore, the other parts of the brain can be totally misarticulated except for the lower brainstem preparations, and so we call them being in a coma. Because the lungs are still working, the chest cage is working, etc., but they're not able to basically tell the body to do anything other than its normal automatic programs that are running. So the key here is that when we are aware that this organ in our head, okay, which is the transducer and the modulator and the amplifier, has many different capacities, then the more that we are aware of the fact that it's being aware of the internal organs that you have within determines what's going to be happening on the outside realm in this dimension. Now, many people want to talk about thinking being something that happens in the head. Yes and no. Okay, thinking is a field of interactivity that's happening actually between your other four bodies. And then eventually whatever the grand decision is then actually translated by the brain into a physical reality that will tell your body how to respond. Okay, so you have to understand that. That's very, very important. So it depends on the frequencies that you allow yourself to integrate with and entertain that will determine what part of the brain is going to be active. Okay, so people who are thinking what we call very low vibrational thoughts, etc., only activate brainstem and the posterior, what we call occipital areas of the brain. Okay, many of us get to the point where we actually activate the temporal lobes, but very few of us are working from frontal lobe activity or from the center of the brain. Because being able to activate the center of the brain by the positive thoughts that you think or the frontal lobes gives you mastership over this dimension. There's no such thing as a solid wall. There's no such thing as having to take an airplane to go anywhere. There's no such thing as not being able to have what you need, and it has nothing to do with money, because at that point in time, you can precipitate or you can command people or objects to basically do your bidding. Now they have a name for those people. They call them bodhisattvas. Okay, and they're no different than you and I. They have to eat and urinate and defecate, etc. The only difference is that they are activating a different part of their brain than you are. So also a very wonderful thing about knowing the keys here, which are these master energy frequencies, is that when you are dedicated to using them all of the time, they actually become cumulative in your body and will activate automatically all of the brain. So the practice of using them all of the time will eventually make all of us bodhisattvas. Oh, wonderful. Okay, the key is and this is where the big dilemma is, because the frequency that your body has now gotten used to vibrating at, etc., is, for many people, uncomfortable, terrifying for them to move into a new resonance rate. So, for example, we're going to talk about purpose being the key. Every molecule, every atom in all of the universes has their appropriate assigned space and time. They all have a purpose. We all have a purpose, and that's the reason for being here. And that means that your whole vibratory rate, the reason why you look the way you do, the reason why you were born, who you were born to, etc., all determine those frequencies. And when you then allow the thought patterns and frequencies of somebody else to determine that you're going to take your little collection of molecules and put it in a space and time that you have no business, because you are not using the keys, which is the most common key that most people don't use, is what? That abundance is a natural state of affairs. So I have to go to this factory every day that I know I have no business in. Okay, you can feel the force field as soon as you get there. Force fields get deep, as soon as you get there, and you just force your way continuously for 8 to 10 hours to stay in this anti-gravitational space for you for money, because you do not use the key that abundance is a natural state of affairs. You're using what I call an anti-key known as lack. And it's amazing to me, because every time I come to New York, that is totally a lie. I have never seen so much of everything in my life in one place in time. I mean, everything. I mean, it's just everything here is just huge mass abundance. So to talk about lack is like you're totally blind if that's how you're going around saying that there's no such thing, you don't have what you need, because it's here. There's too much of it as far as I'm concerned. So the key is then why would a person then put themselves in an anti-gravity field that they feel every day, knowing that they have their own space and time that they should be resonating in? And see, then when you talk about the fact that here you are an energy entity, and you have your own space and time, and all the other molecules are supposed to be working with you and interacting with you, et cetera, you have totally abandoned them. And you're out here trying to make all of these divine interactions with molecules that have no relationship to you at all. How do you think that you're going to have successful relationships? Because you don't even have any business being there. Okay, got to understand that. So if you got a husband that goes to work every day knowing he hates that, you know that your life's going to be hell with him. So you can just get right on that, and that you just are locked into that. And the key is that I ask many women, then why don't you support your husband in being willing to support him and doing what he loves doing? But then now that means that you also realize that you're terrified, because now that's going to bring up your anti-keys that you're not using. Because a person that would be in alignment would not marry a person who tells them that they hate their job. I mean, you automatically have asked for a problem. You meet somebody and they say, I've worked X, Y, and Z, and I hate it. I've been there for 10 years. You are foolish if you understand universal laws and energy frequencies, think that you can have a commitment with an individual who has not even committed to himself. She's ringing the bell. So let's do these keys real quick, because see, when you understand these keys and how they have been ignored and misused, you can forget about that he's the it and this is this. It don't have nothing to do with that, because you can see that everybody already is off their frequency.
One of the things I wanted to say, and I'm glad that Dr. Jewell went back to the brain on the trajectory, is because that lower brain that operates, sort of automatically all the systems in the body is very mechanical. And that's what happens with people when you start operating out of that lower brain. Now, where we want to operate out of, where Dr. Jewell said few people are operating out of, is the frontal. That's the analytical and creative aspect of our brain, and that's where we're moving towards. Everything has a purpose.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, before we get started, because we're just getting ready to give the first key.
I'd ask everybody's indulgence for this question, but it's weighing on me very heavily. Is it inappropriate, and I